Okay, in the 1970s, we had a series of books that were printed that almost all of us had. Probably every Gen 1 fan owned all of these books. Some of them are perennials that exist to this very day. The Starfleet Technical Manual, the Concordance, Star Trek Blueprints, and then some of them, probably not. They received very small print runs. We almost all bought them because, quite frankly, they were one of maybe 10 books that were available during the entire decade that we could buy. But, they were pretty dated, and they never really got reprinted or carried on beyond it, especially in the nonfiction field. And one of the more interesting ones is the first of 2 books that would be written by Susan Sackett. This first book was written pretty much under the tutelage of Gene Roddenberry. It was, I want to call it a cash grab because it wasn't a cash grab, but the idea was definitely, hey, there's money to be made here. Let's take all of these letters and stuff that have been sent to us by fans in the intervening years since the series was canceled and now, and let's assemble the best of them that we think into a book and put it up for sale. The book, Letters to Star Trek. The author, of course, Susan Sackett. In this exclusive book, Gene Roddenberry, often referred to as the Great Bird of the Galaxy, answers his fan mail and shares with you some of the thousands upon thousands of stories and letters he and the guy have received since Star Trek went off the air. And then, of course, there were bullet points on the back that everybody had to understand. Have you ever wondered what the status is on the Star Trek movie? Where you could get your own genuine pair of Spock ears? How to write to the stars? Whatever happened to Grace Lee Whitney? What does NASA think about Star Trek? Are they really teaching Star Trek in college? And what exactly does Gene Roddenberry think about the future? So all rolled up in one little book, they're going to attempt to answer those questions by providing information and addresses of services that they will quite often be happy to sell you. So all contained in this little tome here are the answers to those questions and even more. Now, if I can borrow another advertising slogan for the 1970s, let's let our fingers do the walking through this book here, and let's see what we can find. Now, there is something interesting in this book, and that is the foreword was written by Gene Roddenberry, and it actually contains a photograph of Susan Sackett, which, to be perfectly honest, prior to later years, it's not all that easy to find photographs of her in print. Here's a picture of Susan with the Spock doll from the Movieland Wax Museum. Now, you may or may not be able to read the subtitle here, but Gene Roddenberry talks on the phone. One of the many plans discussing the movie is hyped pretty heavily in this book. Now, it's important to keep track of that at the time the book was actually published or written, even better, written, the movie was probably like In Thy Image or Planet Heights. It was not Star Trek the Motion Picture. This would have been just before Paramount decided, we're not going to do a movie, we're going to bring back Star Trek as Phase 2. And then, of course, they would flip-flop again and decide to go back to the movie. Now, one of the things that they do quite a bit of in this book that I really like, and you don't see much in other books, is that they vary the typeface on the way that stuff is done. So that, specific letters roll on one particular typeface, and then they're offset from the remainder of the chapter or the story or comments by being done in a second typeface. Now, this story is a very short story, but I really wanted to call it out just a little bit here because we recently had a very similar story in one of our live streams that a Gen 1 fan recounted to us. And in this case, the young boy writes Gene Roddenberry and says, "The most valuable things in our house are the TV that we watch Star Trek on, my 4 Star Trek books, and some models." I think we can all identify with that now. However, about a month ago, I had a really bad accident. I accidentally stepped on my Enterprise, and there went the best model in the world. Now, the young boy, obviously, we can look back on that now and chuckle a little bit. Well, Lord knows I chuckled when I read it. It's interesting to hear comments like that, they're the most valuable items in the house, because it shows you exactly how small our worldview was back then, when we didn't have to worry about, feeding the family, going to work every day. Life was a little bit more simpler. There was one letter that was actually pretty neat, and that was a couple mailed in the birth certificate of their child to prove that they had actually named their child Miri after the episode itself. And a photograph of the birth certificate is there. Now, in today's privacy-stricken world, that kind of personal information would never see the light of day in a book like this today. Kind of interesting. If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to jim@trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually one of the first publications that actually would print one of the mythical clapper shots that we'd become so familiar with in the collecting of film frames as time went on. In this case, this shot right down here at the bottom. Today, these aren't really rare at all, but back when this book was produced in 1977, this was probably one of the first times most of us had even seen such a photo. I'm just paging through here, trying to see if I can find us some good candid photos that we've never seen. The book itself, boasts on the cover, plenty of never before published photographs. Well, maybe they were at the time, but since then they've been over-published, so they're not necessarily as noteworthy. So I'm looking for ones right now in here that maybe are a little bit lesser known, like that clapper shot. I did find it interesting. There's a section in here that covers about stories and letters that were written, or just short letters that were written to the Star Trek cast and Gene Roddenberry. And there's one small section that is nothing but just the little teeny snippets from letters about telling Bill Shatner the words potato salad and see how he reacts. 60 years later, that came up not too long ago on a live stream, a behind-the-scenes photo. This shot right here, where they're preparing to do it to shoot a scene on the bridge, but you've got the stage crew down there doing some touch-up on the paint. Again, we've seen these kind of photos since then, but when this was printed, we had not. And then there is one thing I found in here that I thought was really, really fascinating. There's not very many photographs, good photographs in my opinion, of Gene Roddenberry and Matt Jeffries together, but this one, I really wish it were in color. This one came out pretty nice. And just because they want to include a second one, here is another clapper shot towards the end. I have two photographs of Grace Lee Whitney in here that I think are actually pretty good. One of them I have not seen before, the other I have. They printed the photos in response to a letter that literally said, "Whatever happened to Grace Lee Whitney?" The response was, Miss Whitney, who played Yeoman Rand in the first season, says that her part was written out in the second and third seasons so that Captain Kirk could have more love interests. Fans still remember her, and she's very fond of her Star Trek friends, too. She does intend to attend some conventions and has her own fan club. Interesting, solid pat response. Not exactly true about why she wasn't there. And notice the comment was that she says, not what was coming from Gene Roddenberry, who was, of course, looking over Susan's shoulder when she